One of the main things I've observed about life is that problems occur not because of what X is, but because of how we define X. So, to that end, I'm going to be reading you three articles about our friendly neighborhood, possibly despotic and world controlling evil genius, Bill Gates, and something that he's been planning on doing and might get the green light to finally do next. Before I get into the actual reading, if you're watching the video version of this, there shall be a speed drawing going on the screen, and that shall be the don't talk ished, stop talking ished, and no talking ished, or don't talk ished, stop talking ished. I think I already said that already. But quit talking ished, I think that's the other one. And there's going to be merchandise for that. There's different kind of merchandise on it. And with this design, I normally post it on there because I think people say things that kind of ish talking in the sense of ish talking, talking ish about somebody, so you're talking badly about somebody, and that's something that does happen to Bill Gates. People say, oh, he's evil, he's doing this, he's doing that. Or also talking ish, when people say, oh, you're talking about ish you don't really know about. And when I say ish, it's actually that word, human feces, but I say ish because back in the olden days, when I used to listen to radio, when they censored the word, it used to sound like ish when they actually used to do the censoring. So anyway, so that's going to be on the screen because I think with Bill Gates individually, I think some of the things he says might be kind of ish talk, and I talked about him previously. There was a time when he and somebody else were combating between doing something about floating these balloons in Africa to get Wi-Fi to all over the place in the village areas, or spending money on mosquito nets. And my whole case in that situation was Bill Gates was for the mosquito nets, and I was thinking, no, actually, just have the internet, because if you actually inform people about how malaria is actually, like this year, malaria is killing, in I'm recording this from Nairobi, Kenya, is killing, on average it's regular 10,000 people a year, and the actual COVID-19 virus, the death toll attributed to that is about 1,549, if I'm not mistaken, here in Nairobi, Kenya. Yet there's a pandemic for the COVID, but the malaria thing isn't. Whereas you can just have nets, you can do away with running water. You can have people actually invest and find ways to actually prevent the actual spread and ability of malaria, but that's not covered in a certain way. So I was thinking, if you have the internet, if you have a way to actually reach these people with information, they will actually go out and do the necessary things to stop that. There's other ways besides mosquito nets. Because one thing I've seen is if you just give people mosquito nets, first of all, they don't really understand how to use it, why they're getting it. You'll often see them using it to just cover like a nursery of plants because they're thinking, oh, at least we're going to get money from the actual plants, so we need to protect them from the bugs coming to eat them. They have that aspect of it already. They realize that bugs and things can come and eat the plants and then kill the plants and reduce their actual ability to make money from the plants. So they'll cover them with mosquito nets, yet they're not understanding that, hey, there's actually bugs also coming to bite you as a human being, and they can destroy you with the malaria. So I was just kind of thinking that thing. So with Bill Gates, I was thinking one of the things with him is he has access to a lot of information. People might have less information that he has about him, or I think he definitely in general has more access to certain things than I do. And that's kind of how it is. People know about different things. But I also had a separate video talking about a friendly neighborhood oligarch. Some people talk about how, oh, we don't want these people with big money who are not really interested. They're not really part of the people. They don't really understand. We need money out of politics. And then those same people turn around like, oh, Bill Gates, the richest man in the universe. Look, richest man on earth, in the universe, maybe known universe, at least anything we know about with like monies and things like that. But anyway, he's one of the top people, and they're like, yeah, Nick, listen to him. Listen to what he's saying about this. But there's probably things about Bill Gates that you might disagree with, that other people might agree with. And I want to read these three articles to show that, okay, once I heard this story, it was one article in one actual location that was quoting it got from another article, and then that article quoted from the original actually place that thing was posted. So I want to read the three and see if you have a different perception about the story from those three different articles, or are they saying pretty much the same thing? And even if they are saying pretty much the same thing or a different thing, does it change from what the actual proposed thing that Bill Gates is actually attempting to do? How much does your knowledge of Bill Gates actually play into this? I saw this one video. Bill Gates supposedly it was like a meme or something. Supposedly he created viruses for Windows back in the day, and then he would sell the antivirus for them. And like marketing wise, it's kind of a smart move. It's kind of like if you have different levels of morals and, and ethics, it'd be something to do. Like you kind of do it. And they have the white hat hackers who kind of go in and companies hire them to try and figure out how to break into their system and then show them the way other malicious people might be able to do it. And then those people are paid to actually try and destroy the system so they can create better security. So if a malicious person comes. So with this kind of situation, it's kind of the same thing with actual him leading in this COVID-19 kind of vaccine type of movement. There is some aspect where there's actual research being done on certain viruses so you can figure out what they do to humans before it's an actual outbreak situation. So if the outbreak actually comes, you'll be able to have the knowledge of actually having the tests on it and being able to fight it. So there is some aspects of that, and people are equating that to be something to his history with creating viruses for Windows and then selling the antivirus and the vaccine for the computer. They're saying that it would be a similar thing that he's doing right now with COVID. There's been some questions about some vaccine movements he was behind and the actual effect here in Africa and other places. So there are those questions out there. But let's get into the articles now. I'm going to read you the actual titles of the articles and the locations, and then get into it. And I'll try to just read mostly directly through the articles. And remember, keep in mind, these three different sources. I found this first one from The Blaze that goes, controversial Bill Gates funded plan to dim the sun's rays moves forward quietly. Wait, what? As a subheading? And that's the first place I saw it. Then as I was reading through, I found the link to this certain second location, the Western Journal. Bill Gates' savior complex spirals out of control. Funds sun-dimming plan to save the human race. Okay, that's actually it's a commentary piece from the Western Journal. And then the last one was from Thomas Reuters Foundation. It's the Reuters Reuters Foundation, and planned Harvard balloon test in Sweden stirs solar geoengineering unease. And that's the three articles. Again, remember, I got the first one from The Blaze, then I clicked, got to the Western Journal, then I clicked, got to Reuters. Now imagine if I had listened to either one of these stories or either one of these titles first. That was the first thing that I had heard about this. What would your perception be about the situation? And that's also something I want to keep you in mind. You might have three different people talking about this actual incident, this actual issue that's going to be discussed in here. But each of those three people, one person only read the Blaze article, one person only read the Western Journal article, one person only read the Reuters article. What would their perception of the situation be? Let's say they'd never heard of Bill Gates and they'd each heard just one of these articles. What do you think their perception would be? So let me start with the Blaze article. And again, the title for that one was Controversial Bill Gates Funded Plan to Dim the Sun's Rays Moves Forward Quietly. Wait, what? It's by Sarah Taylor. A bizarre-sounding plan to save Earth funded by tech guru Bill Gates is quietly, in quotes, moving forward. The plan to dim the sun's rays and their impact on Earth is reportedly all in the name of helping to revitalize the environment and thus save the human race. What are the details? The billionaire philanthropist is set on saving the Earth no matter the cost. While you may have been paying attention to Gates' efforts on vaccination and lockdowns, you may not have noticed that one of Gates' most controversial causes just got a go-ahead, a project that would help block out the sun. The Western Journal's Douglas Golden wrote, and that's where I clicked from there to go and get to that article. Then Reuters reported that geoengineering plan, a Harvard University project funded largely by Gates, plans to set a controversial theory that global warming can be stopped by spraying particles into the atmosphere that would reflect the sun's rays, end quote. And then that's where I clicked to go to the Reuters article. The news organization reported that the Swedish Space Corporation has already taken strides in testing out the theory. Quote, open-air research into spraying tiny sun-reflecting particles into the stratosphere to offset global warming has been stalled for years by controversies, including that it could discharge needed cuts into greenhouse gas emissions, Reuters reported. In a small step, the Swedish Space Corporation agreed this week to help Harvard researchers launch a balloon near the Arctic town of Kiruna next June. It would carry a gondola with 600 kilograms of specific equipment 20 kilometers or 12 miles high. Golden also cited journal Nature, which broke the plan down into more easily comprehensible terms. The idea is simple. Spray a bunch of particles into the stratosphere, and they will cool the planet by reflecting some of the sun's rays back into space. Nature's Jeff Tollefson wrote in 2018, scientists have already witnessed this principle in action. When Mount Pinatubo erupted in the Philippines in 1991. It injected an estimated 20 million tons of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere, the atmospheric layer that stretches from about 10 to 50 kilometers above the Earth's surface, Tolfason added. The eruption created a haze of sulfate particles that cooled the planet by around zero point 0.5 degrees Celsius for about 18 months. Earth's average temperature returned to what it was before the arrival of the steam engine. End quote. Reuters reported that the plan could move forward in the autumn of 2012 or spring of 2020 and would release a tiny amount of non toxic calcium carbonate dust into the atmosphere to test the theory. What else? The notion of geoengineering is a controversial one, as environmentalists have warned that such a plan could render alarming consequences. There are several problems with this plan, not at least of which is that we don't know what the unintended consequences might be. But to environmentalists, the problem is that it doesn't solve global warming the way they wanted to do it, Douglas writes. I think I already did a different voice for Douglas before, and then I changed voice here. Let's just keep going. Reuters also reported that many of the plan's opponents fear a, quote, slippery slope towards engineering the climate, end quote. Niklas Hallström, director of the Sweden-based environmentalist think tank What Next, told Reuters, I can't do accents. I just try to do different voices here. So anyway, it was a Scandinavian accent. There's a way to do it. Maybe I'd look into doing that more if I continue doing this type of things, or just like some voice editing or something. I don't know. Anyway, so quote: "There is no merit in this text except to enable the next step. You can't test the trigger of a bomb and say this can't possibly do any harm." That's a good point. Hallström added that he has reservations over the concept for its, quote, potential to change rain patterns or crop yields, end quote. Lili Fuhr, who is the head of the International Environmental Policy Division at the Heinrich Boll Foundation in Germany, said that the project is, indeed, crossing an important political red line. They don't want to stop at this small experiment. The reason is to get bigger experiments, she explained. Reuters reported that both Fuhr and Hallström said the plan would violate a global 2010 moratorium on geoengineering under the UN Convention on Biodiversity. Jim Thomas, co-CEO of environmentalist organization ETC Group, said that he and his peers also oppose the idea. This is as much an experiment in changing social norms and crossing a line as it is a science experiment, Thomas warned. Okay, so that was the initial Blaze article. From the title, as I mentioned, was Controversial Bill Gates Funded Plan to Dim the Sun's Rays Moves Forward Quietly. So what do you think is actually said? Has this assuaged any of your fears? I think from the initial thing, like, oh, wait, damn, this is, but I think most people who are somewhat aware of how the climate works and things like this would get some general idea of what it is. But would you be thinking some sort of Bond movie villain type of thing, blanking out the Earth, covering it with some dome where it's actually like night at all times? What were you kind of thinking with it? Do you have enough information about this? Do you feel they've actually talked about the details? If people thought, oh, environmentalists will be for this, do they think, oh yeah, environmentalists are just all about climate change and they just want anything that's going to change and fight climate change, they'll be supporting? But you see here, there's several environmentalists, there's several international organizations who have been against something like this happening. Some people saying, oh, this is okay to do it, this is okay. When you talk about something like this, from my general understanding of this, how are you really going to control where these things go? I guess the kind of idea, as they mentioned in this, is to go bigger, where they want this to be a global thing. You put something out in in the sky there, you're not just going to limit it to where it goes. It can cross borders. It can go all over the earth. You don't know what's actually going to happen and that kind of stuff. So that's somewhat concerning. Okay. Now moving on to the next article here, and I said this is from the Western Journal. And then again, keep in mind that, think about this. Let's say 3 different people had only heard the titles, or 3 different people had only read the actual articles. What do you think will be different from the actual discussion about this actual topic? Okay, the title here was Bill Gates' Savior Complex Spirals Out of Control, Funds Sun Dimming Plan to Save the Human Race. Now, just one thing on the title here. With Bill Gates, a lot of people have Messiah complex. That's a very real thing. But then very few people are in the position of Bill Gates to have been somebody who actually lived a life where they made certain decisions and risks and did something new that has literally been a key part in changing the entire human race. So for him, if anyone would have a messiah complex that you can say is somewhat understandable, it would be someone like Bill Gates. If other people can look at someone and say, okay, we've seen, like, if somebody just looks at me and looks at things that I've achieved in life, and they're like, oh, I'm telling you, you need to do this in different ways. Like, what have you done in your life to actually show me that that should be something to do? With Bill Gates, people can look at him and say, yes, his hunches, his ideas led to the invention of the actual initiation of the information age. And I think with that information age, I'm looking to move forward to the age of understanding. So for him, the part that he played in that is a major part. Yes, you can go into the actual documentary, you can actually go into the actual info, and he might have been somebody who took this from someone else, did this other part. We don't do these things in a vacuum. But he's somebody who played a part in crystallizing all that information, all that tsunami of human history and accumulation of knowledge into something that was practical. And that was a point where we kind of funneled down to a few point of some few people, and then now it's exploded back out. Now the opportunities that have come from that focus of all these things coming to that one pot, one kind of tiny spot with a few hundred people, which he was a part of, now have grown up into something bigger. So it's understandable if he does have a messiah complex, even though he isn't, I think, a messiah. Okay, so back into the actual reading. This is by C. Douglas Golden, and this is published on December 27th. It's the day before the other one, but here we go. So Bill Gates is now best known as a philanthropist, not the guy who started Microsoft or was the avatar for everyone's annoyance with Windows 95. He's also known for wanting to save us from ourselves. Now, apparently, he wants to save us from the sun. Gates, for those of you who don't follow these things, has been big on both vaccination and pandemic prevention. Fair enough. That certainly means his moment has arrived. However, he's about as much of a lockdown guy as you can get. Which is just fine if you're a billionaire who can afford to hide away as if this were Poe's The Mask of the Red Death. But the real world consequences for the rest of us can be problematic. However, while you may have been paying attention to his efforts in vaccination and lockdowns, you may have not noticed that one of Gates's most controversial causes just got to go ahead, a project that would help block out the sun. This sounds a bit like the plot to Highlander 2, The Quickening. Is that... For a second there was like Zoolander 2. I was like, wait, Ben Stiller, the Zoolander model kind of thing, went to sun blackening in part 2? I did not remember that at all. But Highlander series, that was with the late Sean Connery and Christopher Lambert, I think. Was it Christopher Lambert or was it Mel Gibson? And let me double check that. We didn't pause here. Okay, so that's it. It's an age of understanding. This is the kind of thing I'm reading. If I'm recording some of these things, sometimes I just like doing them stream of thought and not stopping. But then in situations like this, you have the internet. We can actually understand things better. And I was right with Christopher Lambert. I wrote down the last time I was on a flight. I watched the Highlander film again. Great film from the 90s, from 1991, from the 80s actually, because Highlander 2: The Quickening was 1991. Great film of a series of some immortals. Sean Connery and Christopher Lambert play these immortal characters. I highly suggest you watch it. I think I will come out and do that. I'll probably do the review. Might get into more like reviews of things because I want to get more to actually creating stories and things like that going into like this. Because as I'm talking about this, problems occur because of how you define X, not because of what X is. And stories are a way we tell definitions about things and understand the world and navigate our reality tunnels. And I want all of us to have a better way of sharing information, telling stories, and understanding stories and more access to them. So I want to go into analysis of this. Okay, but it's an important. I think it's a film worth watching. Where was I? Coming back to the actual article with the Western Journal. So yeah, they were talking about, that sounds a bit like a plot to Highlander 2, The Quickening, but it's nothing near that science fiction-y. Science fiction-y, word. Yeah, okay, so anyway, back to the reading. According to Reuters, a Harvard University project plans to test out a controversial theory that global warming can be stopped by spraying particles into the atmosphere that would reflect the sun's rays. The project represents one of the most controversial aspects of what's known as geoengineering, the idea that to tackle issues like climate change, massive aspects of our ecosystem can be played with or changed. In this case, it would involve reflecting some of the sun's rays to stop them from reaching the Earth. Open-air research into spraying tiny sun-reflecting particles into the stratosphere to offset global warming has been stalled for years by controversies, including that it would discourage needed cuts in greenhouse gas emissions, Reuters reported. In a small step, the Swedish Space Corporation agreed to this week to help Harvard researchers launch a balloon near the Arctic town of Kiruna next June. It would carry a gondola with 600 kilograms of scientific equipment, 20 kilometers or 12 miles high. The Harvard team, whose project is known as SCOPEX, is founded in large part by Gates, according to an August report in the UK Daily Mail, which gave the subject a wordy title. Condemning the Daily Mail does really go above and beyond with the actual titles. I guess once you're online and you don't really have to worry about actually saving space on the actual print when you're actually doing physical papers, it's a different thing. Okay, so this was the title. Could dimming the sun save the Earth? Bill Gates wants to spray millions of tons of dust into the stratosphere to stop global warming, but critics fear it could trigger calamity. So, the Journal of Nature was less judgmental. The idea is simple. Spray a bunch of particles into the stratosphere, and they will cool the planet by reflecting some of the sun's rays back into space. Scientists have already witnessed the principle in action. Nature already reported in 2018, headline, First sun dimming experiment will test a way to cool Earth. It's nice. It makes you. It's the same thing. Like, is it the two kind of same things being reported on? As you can see the change, and that's what I'm saying. Like, what would people think? People are living in different realities. Some people only read the Nature article. Some people only read the Daily Mail thing. Some people imagine if you come into this actual articles when one of the others is what you'd actually read before. What do you see when you actually see the titles of these ones? Okay, and there will be some repetition here, and this also keep in mind. These people writing different articles under different titles still seem to be taking the different quotes from it. Is this something that's industry standard? These are the important parts. So that's a whole thing. Like, how much information are people actually getting from these certain things? Okay, so here we go. When Mount Pinatubo erupted in the Philippines in 1991, it injected an estimated 20 million tons of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere, the atmospheric layer that stretches from about 10 to 50 kilometers above the Earth's surface. The eruption created a haze of sulfate particles that cooled the planet by around 0. 0.5 degrees Celsius. For about 18 months, Earth's average temperature returned to what it was before the arrival of the steam engine. End quote. There are several problems with this plan, not the least of which is that we don't know what the unintended consequences might be. But to environmentalists, the problem is that it doesn't solve global warming the way they want it to. Quote, there is no merit in this test except to enable the next step. You can't test the trigger of a bomb and say, this can't possibly do any harm, said Niklas Hallström, director of the Sweden-based environmentalist think tank, What Next? And while Hallström is worried about some of the same things that other people are, the potential to change rain patterns or crop yields, he's also concerned that people aren't concerned enough about the solution he wants, which is a transition to a zero-carbon society. Swedish society is increasingly calling for real, immediate solutions to climate change, he said. Right. He's not the only one either. This is as much an experiment in changing social norms and crossing a line as it is a science experiment, said Jim Thomas, co-executive director of Canadian-based environmentalist organization ETC Group, which opposes the idea. But then again, Gates lives in a dream world where his advice on pandemics and global warming is given equal weight as his time developing windows. When it comes to the pandemic, Gates has said that he expects businesses and restaurants to remain shuttered for some time. And then here there's a link to a post of a clip of him on CNN and Bill Gates on COVID. Even he has an interesting way of speaking. These little giggles that he does. It's like, even through 2020, we should be prepared for life to return to normal. Says, sadly, it's appropriate for bars and restaurants to close over the next 4 to 6 months. And this was posted in December 13th of 2020. So yeah, that's one thing that's been curious to me. I'm wondering, why do people think that if somebody is capable at one thing, that crosses over to other things? You know, people say, oh, you're not an expert in this, but why do people consider Bill Gates to have an expertise in this? And as has been mentioned, as I may have mentioned before, as has been mentioned in some of these articles, this is something Bill Gates has invested lots of time in. Sure, he might not have degrees in some of these things, but he has been funding and involved in philanthropy in certain fields for quite a long time. So he may have actually accumulated a lot of knowledge about certain topics and things based off of certain actual definitions that might that might cause the disagreement that I have with some of the things that he says, and other people have, or may cause people to agree with some of the things he says. So that's kind of what I'm saying there. Okay, so this is what he said here. So bars and restaurants in most of the country will be closed as we go into the wave, and I think sadly that's appropriate. He said during an interview with CNN's Jake Tapper. He said during an interview with CNN's Jake Tapper in an interview earlier this month. Okay, the next four to 6 months really call on us to do our best because we can see that this will end, and you don't want somebody that you love to be the last to die of coronavirus. He also called out fellow billionaire Elon Musk for his statements questioning the science behind mask wearing. Elon's positioning to maintain a high level is to maintain a high level of outrageous comments. Gates said in a July CNBC interview. He's not much involved in vaccines. He makes a great electric car, and his rockets work well, so he's allowed to say these things. I hope that he doesn't confuse areas he's not involved into much. So that's what I was saying before. Like he's been involved in this, so I'm not taking that away from him. Okay. So, however, when it came to outrageous comments, keep in mind that in the same interview, Gates said that when it came to the coronavirus, China did a lot of things right at the beginning. Like any country where the virus first shows up, they can look back and say they missed some things. Again, right. In short, Bill Gates doesn't have a particularly great handle on COVID, much less the current vaccine process. He panders to China. His work with the vaccine has been desultory at best. Desultory. Took another pause there to look at the word. Desultory, adjective, desultory. Adjective, lacking a plan, purpose, or enthusiasm. And of conversation or speech, going from one subject to another in a half-hearted way, or occurring randomly or occasionally. Yeah, I think that's a decent enough explanation of how most state actors and most elites and people have been reacting and treating this whole situation. So yeah, it's not expected. Okay, so his work on the vaccine has been desultory at best. And now, what he wants us all to believe is that he's got a handle on everything, including blotting out the sun to make the world cooler. Get the economics and business killing lockdowns together, Bill. Then we'll see about your geoengineering gambit. And that's it for this article. There's a few thoughts here. It's mentioned before here. The climate is changing. That is for certain. The climate has changed before humans were actually doing things and creating all this technology. Like talk about the steam engine that's been mentioned twice here, and I imagine it shall come up again in the Reuters article if that was a quote from the Reuters article. But when you talk about that, I think the invention of a steam engine was more of a win for the human species. And I'm on Team Human. I am for human flourishing more. There's more humans alive today than they have been in known history. So, since I am pro humans being alive, there are things that led to the world today that, in general, they have been more positive since there's more humans today. That is my whole thinking, my base thinking on that thing. So, when I look at the climate, I'm here in Nairobi, Kenya, which is on the equator. The actual space on Earth that human beings biologically evolved to exist in is rather limited. Take away the fact that the majority of the surface of the world itself is water, and we can't breathe in water. So already just the strip of land that's around the equator, that's around a few latitude, longitude, latitudes, a few latitudes up from the equator is that Goldilocks zone. First of all, the Earth itself isn't a Goldilocks zone in the planet. This is something they were talking about. Somebody did a self-own and they're talking about the climate change and things. They were talking about, the actual temperature on Venus used to be good before greenhouse gases had an effect, and now it's like human life couldn't live on Venus. And then, first of all, that is a ridiculous thing to say. What kind of testing are we actually doing on this kind of thing? Like, how do we actually know that this is going to actually be? Do we have? I think there's a Russian spaceship. There is a Russian spaceship that got to Venus, but the actual amount of testing that you actually have to understand the effect of that thing, and then on top of that, the person was pointing that out as a case for why humans need to stop what they're doing to end this global catastrophic climate change that humans are responsible for, and they were pointing out that Venus, a planet that never had human beings on it that we know of, had climate change. So that was without sentient beings doing anything. And that's the case that some people are saying. I'm talking about the climate has been changing, it will be changing. We don't know what a full cycle of the Earth's climate is like. Is it 400 years? Is it 500 years? Is it 5,000 years for it to go through a full cycle? I know that the Earth is kind of tilted at 23 degrees. Like, it's still tilted off center. It's not like straight up and down. So what happens when it tilts back? There's many things that could change that happen with Earth. But right now, There's more humans alive, so that's a positive thing. The invention of the steam engine did more good than harm. Invention of nuclear technology has done more good than harm. Bill Gates inventing the internet, or not the internet, inventing computers in the way that he did, the Windows system and things like that, has done more good than harm. So this is the kind of things where I'm thinking like, okay, in general, we're looking towards a more positive situation. So some of the things that people are proposing, just like with the pandemic, saying this is the threat. Yes, the virus is real. Yes, people are dying from the virus, but we're going to solve it by doing this. Does that end up with more people dying from it? Why do we need a pandemic shutdown in Kenya to prevent it being more than 1,500 people dying, but there's no pandemic shutdown for malaria? Those are the kind of things. And the practicalities that malaria is an insect, it's something that's been known for longer, all these kind of things, unknown factors, and all these things to kind of think of. And that's the same thing with climate change. The changes that are happening with the climate. First of all, how are you knowledgeable that it's actually humans doing this? Do you have this God complex where you think we are actually that powerful to really do these effective changes? We are affecting things in certain ways, but I think air conditioning is a form of changing the limited climate around your area. If you're in a vehicle and you have a fan, you change it, you are changing the climate in your area. But most of those things are for the betterment of human lives. And that's kind of the top thing I'm concerned about with some of these things. What are the actual effects of the kind of things that are going into the kind of thought patterns here? So, with that being said, we're going to get into the last article here, and thank you for listening to this. And we're here at the Reuters article. Planned Harvard balloon test in Sweden stirs solar geoengineering unease. And this was on Friday, 18th December of 2020. Now, the first article I saw was the Blaze article, and you can see that kind of mostly referred to this Reuters article and the Western Journal article. And I think the people in the Blaze, from knowing their kind of political leaning, could have got wind of it through the Western Journal, because they actually mentioned the Western Journal there, and then decided to write their own piece on it. But it took about 10 days for it to actually get out there to be news. I recently saw this post by the 2019 Teacher of the Year in the United States of America, and he had posted something about Mitch McConnell, who's one of the leaders of the GOP, the Grand Old Party, the Republican Party in the United States of America. And he was like, oh, we're Mitch McConnell's neighbors, because we saw what the neighbors did to Rand Paul. And with Rand Paul, he's a libertarian, but he's a Republican senator that got assaulted in his home, that he actually had to have some surgery to fix his lung by his neighbor coming and assaulting him. And this person was like, oh yeah, that person needs to actually go out there and do us a solid and be like a hero. And that was supposedly a joke, saying they should actually initiate political violence on Mitch McConnell, which is a form of terrorism. And then a post after that, they talked about, oh, we need more. I was at a dentist's office, and I was asking the oral hygienist, can they circle the actual names of the black oral hygienists? And I guess he's pro-black. And then he deleted the post about Mitch McConnell, and then came out and said, oh yeah, these people came on here, and the funny thing about this is I tweeted that thing about Mitch McConnell earlier in the day, and nobody really said anything until I posted this about black medical awareness. Like, no. Things take a while for it to become the news. It's not like people were sitting following this guy's actual profile and like, oh, you said that about Mitch McConnell. We don't care about that possible threat. Oh, you said something about black medical. Yeah, now we're going to get at him. Come on now. I don't think that person actually believes that. But this is just showing like sometimes with the information age, with the internet, with computers, we're going to get to a point where you're going to have more understanding, you're going to have more access to the information. How long does it take for you to understand this is happening and then these are the results? How long have we been tracking the actual effects of the climate changing to understand that when this happens in the climate, these are the results? And some of these things is rather recent. The ability to know what this Teacher of the Year had said from here in Nairobi, Kenya, I didn't have that ability 10 years ago. I definitely did not have the ability back in the 1980s. So when you look at the actual chart showing the climate change over the 1980s to this year, and it shows that between 1980 and I think 2010, there was a chart a friend sent to me. I might put it on the screen now, that showed that the actual coverage of ice on the world or something between, I think it was something like September and February, or September and now, or something. It was showing the different time span of a few months, how it changes when the winter comes in and the summer goes out. And it showed that right now, the last year that it had the details for was in the 95th bottom percentile, as it was from the average of the span between 81 and 2010. Now, I was saying with 81 and 2010, with that kind of situation, I'm thinking, and it was similar curves as you'll see on the chart. I'm thinking, what was the actual ability to test the actual changes in 1981? Were they using the same kind of tests then? And the same thing when you talk about the actual things with the COVID. You look at United States of America, certain places. New York City itself has, let me check. New York City itself has about 20 million people in New York City proper. If you're looking at the greater metro area, I think it goes up to 35 million people, but I think they're talking about the actual deaths from COVID is 37,412. As I mentioned, the actual deaths in Kenya were something like 1,540 something. And we're talking about 45 million people in Kenya. Now, if you just look at those two numbers, is it, oh, the Kenyan government did such a better job at protecting people from COVID than Bill de Blasio and the mayor of the mayor of New York City, which is Bill de Blasio, and the governor of New York, which is what's it called, Andrew Cuomo, and the president of the United States of America, which is Donald Trump? Are you saying those deaths are on them because they weren't as good as the Kenyan government at protecting their citizens from this virus? Why would you assume that they're using the same kind of testing? Why would you assume that the population itself is sheer just, oh, one human in Kenya is the same human as in New York? When you look at the actual deaths in New York, you look at the actual numbers of people, that's a lot of older people. What is the average age of the population? What are the races of the population? What is the general health level of these populations? What is the density of the areas? Those are the kind of things that people need to kind of think of when they look at these things. So when you're looking at something with climate, where are you measuring from? Where is your ground? What is your norm? What is the mean? What are the modes of testing that you're actually going in? So these are the kind of things that I like to keep in mind when we're talking about certain stories like this. But let me get into the reading of the actual article. By Alistair Doyle. Oslo, December 18th, Thomas Reuters Foundation. Harvard University scientists plan to fly a test balloon above Sweden next year to help advance research into dimming sunlight to cool the Earth, alarming environmentalists opposed to solar geoengineering. Open-air research into spraying tiny, sun-reflecting particles into the stratosphere to offset global warming has been stalled for years by controversies, including that it could discourage needed cuts in greenhouse gas emissions. In a small step, the Swedish Space Corporation agreed this week to help Harvard researchers launch a balloon near the Arctic town of Kiruna next June. It would carry a gondola with 600 kilograms of scientific equipment 20 kilometers or 12 miles high. There are very many real concerns about the risks of climate change and solar geoengineering, said David Keith, who is involved in the project and is a professor of applied physics at the Harvard School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. Understanding them requires a range of activities, including experiments, said Keith, who is also a professor of public policy at the Harvard Kennedy School. The unmanned flight had been originally planned for the United States but was moved, partly because of the US restrictions caused by coronavirus. The flight, which requires approval from a Harvard Project Advisory Committee, will test how to maneuver the balloon and check communications equipment and other systems. It would not release any particles into the stratosphere. Still, if successful, it could be a step towards an experiment. Perhaps in the autumn of 2021 or spring of 2022, to release a tiny amount, up to 2 kilograms, of non-toxic calcium carbonate dust into the atmosphere, Keith said. Studying that material's effect on high-altitude sunlight could help advance understanding of how solar geoengineering might work. Okay, so just a few things. In the start, it had said they had updated by changing a typo, and the first one I think is the typo there, advanced understanding instead of just understanding. This happens to me too, because when you're doing the spell check and you rely on that, if you actually put in a word that's an actual word, and especially when here it's close to understand or understanding, the spell check won't show it. And then actually, if you're even rereading it yourself, you don't have a separate editor, there could be a thing where your mind just puts it as understanding, because when you were writing it down, it was understanding. Your mind does this amazing thing of doing the shorthand and just putting things like, you don't really have to have the entire word. You can have a sentence where it has like the first letter and the last letter in the right place, but the letters in the middle are jumbled, and you just read through because your mind will arrange the things in a certain way. So that's kind of the thing. Like, we see certain things and we make them into familiar things, and we talk about this is another thing. And here they're talking about it. You see, in this article, they specifically say that this current thing that was actually approved is not actually going to have any release. It's just testing the equipment that would test any potential release of actual 2 kilograms that could potentially be done in autumn 2021 or spring of 2022, a year from now. But in the other ones, they still haven't mentioned Bill Gates in this article. But in those other ones, we're focusing on the Bill Gates aspect. Is the Bill Gates aspect that important? If you just heard that, oh, Bill Gates is doing this, but this is the whole situation. Another thing with Harvard, I've had this series of conversations with my friend Stephen, where we talk about the book Cracks in the Ivory Tower, The Moral Mess of Higher Education, I think by Jason Brennan, and I think Jason Brennan and Phil Magnus, or it might be just Jason Brennan. But we're reading that book and we're talking about different things, and we talk about the actual endowments of these schools. It's like in the billions. And I think these are the kind of things that they do. It's not just the university that the people coming in get the paid and then they get the money from the government giving them the money from the tuition and the loans. There's other things they do, I think, with the endowments and all these other things. So anyway, back to the reading. So I think it was important. I think it's kind of important to show that this actual thing they guess they mentioned before the slippery slope thing that they're going to get into here in those other articles, but I think it would have helped to kind of mention that those things, those tests, the test that they're talking about that actually got the okay that here was going to happen in Kiruna Island was not actually going to release anything into space. I think that'd be good. Okay, so a slippery slope. But opponents see the Swedish balloon as a step on a slippery slope towards engineering the climate with an artificial sunshade, something with potentially large and hard to predict risks, such as shifts in global rain patterns. There is no merit in this test except to enable the next step. You can't test the trigger of a bomb and say, this can't possibly do any harm, said Nicholas Hallström, director of the Swedish green think tank What Next. And again, that's what I mentioned. I think this is the thing. So they already show that it's the trigger of the bomb. When they just say the trigger of the bomb, they don't mention in the actual article, as it was mentioned here above, that there's actually no powder dust being actually released in this actual thing. I think that could be something to kind of add in those things, in those other articles. Okay. Swedish society is increasingly calling for real, immediate solutions to climate change, he said, such as rapid transformation away from fossil fuels and towards a zero carbon society. He said that the Harvard Project represents the polar opposite, as it could create the impression that continuing use of fossil fuels is possible. Lili Fuhr, head of the International Environmental Policy Division at the Heinrich Böll Foundation in Germany, also said that the plan was crossing an important political red line. They don't want to stop at this small experiment. The reason is to get bigger experiments, she said. She and Hallström said that the plan would violate a global 2010 moratorium on geoengineering under the UN Convention on Biodiversity. That non-binding moratorium, non-binding means you don't really have to do stuff to it, and also the Paris Climate Accord is also a non-binding moratorium, or it's a non-binding agreement, it's not a moratorium. Okay. That non-binding moratorium, however, allows exemptions for small-scale scientific research studies. Officials of the Harvard Project, the Stratospheric Controlled Perturbation Experiment, that's what the SCOP-PEX stands for. And I think that was, to me, if I'm writing an article, and I'm not going to put an acronym of something if I've not mentioned it before. So I think in those previous articles, they should have put the whole actual thing of it. And they didn't even have a link to the actual thing that you can click here. Here it has the actual name of it, has a link where you can click to get more information. And this is the way I like reading articles. I actually go in, and that's part of why I decided to get this whole thing. Because I get an actual title, then I go in. If there's no comment section on the article and it's not just a direct news thing, it's more of an opinion piece and no commentary, and there's no comment section, I'm probably not going to read your actual article. But when I get to an actual article, I like seeing the links and getting as close to the initial source that this actual content came from. And this is the journey I normally take. So I like having these links here. Okay. So they said they did not believe it needed any special approval from Sweden for the flight. Scopex said that about 300 similar stratospheric balloons were launched worldwide in 2019. Backers of Scopex include Microsoft founder Bill Gates. So that's where the first thing comes. So backups include. So who else is in there? Right? Bill Gates are doing this. Okay. So Annie Bolonius, spokeswoman for the Swedish Space Corporation, also said, "We comply with all applicable international and national legislations. Janos Pastor, it's P-S-Z-T-R, Pastor. I think it's Pastor, I don't know, Janos Pastor, excuse me if I'm butchering the name there, executive director of the Carnegie Climate Governance Initiative, praised the openness of the Harvard step-by-step approach. Let's not exaggerate and overreact on the critical negative side, he urged, saying the Swedish test could help society debate and understand the urgency of addressing climate change. The Carnegie Project says it's impartial about the potential use of climate-altering technologies, but wants to ensure robust governance. Proponents of solar geoengineering, also known as solar radiation modification, say deployment of the technology could be a shortcut to slow a rise in global temperatures that is stoking more heat waves, wildfires, droughts, and rising sea levels as billions of tons of greenhouse gases build up in the atmosphere. But opponents fear that it could undermine commitments to act under the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement and could have unwanted side effects. It would also, for instance, do nothing to slow a buildup of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that is turning the world's oceans increasingly acidic. Keith said that it made sense to study solar geoengineering. There is a long history of people doing research on things that were socially unpopular at the time and now that we now see as important, he said, such as birth control. So yeah, that's it. And again, what do you think people would have thought if they just read the titles or just read the articles? How do you think one gets, or do you think they did them justice in the Blaze and the Western Journal from this actual article, which is, I think, the main core for both of those two other articles? Do you agree with this whole situation? Some of the people who are objecting to it, people might object. It's Bill Gates, he's doing this thing. We object, we object. But then they look at the article and like, oh, look at these other people, they're objecting as well. But then would they agree that these people are objecting because they think the Paris Accord? You know, some of the people who would object to Bill Gates would also likely object to the Paris Accord. I don't think the Paris Accord is really that worthwhile. As I said, it's non-binding. They even had a thing released by one of these international organizations that stated that, oh, actually, the U.S. doesn't have to get back into the Paris Accords because they're one of the few countries that has actually reached and surpassed all of those targets that were in this agreement out of all the other countries that remained in the actual agreement. So that's one thing that was mentioned there. And I think that is more of a thing because even if it is a Biden presidency, there's a lot of things that Donald Trump did that were actually practically good for the actual economy. Look at policy-wise. There's going to be very few actual policy things, direct policy things that Biden's going to change around. And most people don't even, this is voting against Trump. It's more of like a personality thing. Because you ask people, what are the actual policy things that you think Trump did wrong that Biden will do differently, or Trump initiated that Biden is going to now overturn and bring back in? It's going to be things like signing the Paris Accord. Why? What's the point of doing the Paris Accord if you're really doing the actual achieving things? So this is the kind of thing. So I disagree with some of the things, the reasons people are against this. In this one, I actually think I'm actually behind this. I want us to know what we can actually do. I want us to actually know that if we actually have this amount of particulate, let's get actual figures, good solid figures on what this amount of increased dust and elements that we studied does over this given area. And then we'll have a better understanding of, hey, if we're doing something like blowing up the ground in order to actually build actual buildings, how much particulate is being kicked up into the sky and doing these things, what are the effects? We can have better knowledge on this. When we're talking about, oh, the actual changes and the more acidity of the ocean or more carbon dioxide, is carbon dioxide in the globe actually bad? Carbon dioxide is plant food. So why is that such a bad thing? But well, maybe it's a bad thing because the actual lungs of the earth are not actually the Amazon, it's actually algae in the ocean. So maybe if you actually make the ocean more acidic, that could be killing the algae. But then what if the actual changes of the actual ocean itself is actually creating more actual algae, and then there's going to be more oxygen because that's clean? So there's all these things to kind of think about. So with this one, from the actual thing, I don't care. It looks like from those initial articles, it's like this is Bill Gates's pet project, like he's some Dr. Evil hiding off in some place, like doing this, like pulling some strings behind the back. I don't think that it is. This is a thing that would have gone on regardless. This is the kind of things that are going on. These are the kind of things that people fund and invest in things. So when people talk about, oh, there's a difference with the actual change in the climate, you look at certain figures and say, look, in the 80s, there's not to be, actually it was worse in the 80s than it is now. And we've actually have more people using fossil fuels today. People say, oh, it's actually better now because in the 80s, they might have been using less fossil fuel, there might have been less human beings, but because we started investing in the actual environment, environmental global climate and change and all those kind of things, we invested in technology, we invested in research, that has both improved our ability to test the actual things and also taken steps to reduce it, and that's why we're not seeing that different of a change in the things. And they're not going to say that's because this is actually not that catastrophic an effect of human beings. So there's just a lot to think about here. And thank you for listening. And I hope you come back and listen to more of my content. As I said on the screen, there was going to be don't talk ish, stop talking ish, quit talking ish. And I think that's one of the great things about the time that we live in right now. You don't have to ish talk. You don't have to talk ish about people. You can actually go out and find the real ish that you want to talk about. You can actually understand the ish as much as you want. And these kind of scientific experiments are about finding out more ish about the world. Are we creating an ishtier world? I don't think we are creating an ishtier world. I think we're actually creating a better world for humans to flourish in. And I think for part of that, despite what they say here, the use of fossil fuels is no longer I guarantee you, this balloon being sent up. Okay, it's a balloon. Maybe it's going to be floated from the Earth. It's going to be filled with air and sent up there. But there's going to be components that created this balloon that use fossil fuels. Fossil fuels can still be used. Like fossil fuels are just organic, antique sunlight. These are plants that trapped the energy from the sun and were put into the earth and squeezed down by gravitational pressures and things like that. And then over some time, they changed. And then now we take that captured energy and through combustion and other forms, we can now explode and free that energy and use it and put it back into the world. We're not adding anything new that wasn't here on planet Earth before when we actually use fossil fuels. There's less positive ways of doing it, but human beings are not creating any new elements that do not already exist on Earth. We have yet to get to the time where we can go and mine asteroids and more stories on that. I think that might be one of the next stories I get to because it's really fascinating stuff going out into space and bringing in actual elements from out there. So anyway, so that's it for now. Like, share, and subscribe. Follow my content wherever you listen to this. There should be links to the merchandise store where you can get those merchandise with the shirts or the other kind of designs on it. I'm going to be doing more of this content. Let me know if you like these reading the articles or if you just want more off the wall. I mentioned conversation series. That's one of the things I'm going to be getting more into, talking about actual conversations, talking to people about actual topics and things like that. Even if it's reading an article like this, maybe read an article like this and have somebody else on board as we read the article so I can get their thoughts and ideas. I want my content to be more conversational, more interactive, and then open it up also to people who are listening to come in and maybe use the same platform, use the same system to encourage them having conversations and sharing their conversations and information with other people so we can get past that situation where the problems occur not because of what X is, but because of how we define X. So if you defined this story in one way as an evil project by Bill Gates, if you define Bill Gates as a certain kind of person, somebody who has helped us in a certain way so we should believe him, that might change the actual X of this actually being a balloon sent up to test a machine that could possibly do this test for this actual condition that is actually existing. Some people might say that condition is catastrophic world ending, so we need to do everything to stop it. Some people might say it's just part of what the world does, so we still need to do something, but it's not as catastrophic, so we didn't need to shut down things. So they're just these things to understand, and I'm just trying to get some better understanding. Yeah, that's it for now. Goodbye.